The night was quiet, the kind of silence that stretches out and swallows every sound until even the wind holds its breath. In the heart of the valley, beneath a sky sprinkled with stars, stood an old barn, its wooden walls creaking softly in the cool air. To anyone passing by, it seemed like just an ordinary barn. But tonight, it was the center of a plan that could ignite the very ground beneath it. Three figures emerged from the shadows, their faces barely visible under the hoods pulled tight against the night. They moved like ghosts, creeping closer to their target with a menacing purpose. What lay inside that barn almost glowed with resentment, a treasure trove of hard labor and hope, a lifetime of dreams woven into the very fabric of its structure. And it was this very treasure that made it a target, a decision they'd made over beers and slaps on the back at the local bar. "Tonight's the night," one of them whispered, his voice barely above a murmur. He glanced nervously toward the farmhouse, where the farmer and his family slept, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing just a stone's throw away. It was an ideal plan, or so they thought. A quick flicker of fire, a blazing inferno, and the farmer would lose everything. But what these men didn't account for was the spirit that guarded that barn, the spirit of a farmer who had fought storms, droughts, and every challenge nature could throw his way. Inside that barn, the farmer, Tom Reynolds, had been awake for hours. His calloused hands busied themselves with the tools of his trade, checking and rechecking the equipment that had brought him success through the seasons. He noticed a flicker of movement outside, the rustle of leaves, shadows darting just beyond his sight. Instinct kicked in, and he felt a rush of adrenaline, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. This was his land, his sanctuary, and nobody would set it ablaze. Tom stepped quietly to the edge of the open barn door. He peered into the night, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant chirping of crickets. It was then he caught sight of them, the silhouettes moving like smoke against the moonlight. A slow fury built inside him, mingling with an awareness that this was not just some random act. The fire they planned wasn't merely an act of vandalism. It was a strike against everything he had built with his own hands. With a determined set in his jaw, Tom moved swiftly across the barn, a decade of experience guiding him. He'd spent countless nights working late, keeping watch over his livestock, and now he could see the danger as clearly as if it were daylight. Underneath the rickety old loft, he kept an old, rusted fire extinguisher, a relic from years gone by. But it wasn't merely a tool. In his mind, it symbolized all the things he would protect, his family, his livelihood. As he grabbed it, a rush of memories flooded back, each one a testament to his stubborn perseverance. The first time he held his newborn daughter and swore to protect her future. The backbreaking labor of tilling fields come springtime, the sweat dripping down his brow, each drop a sacrifice he made for this land. And now, two petty criminals sought to reduce it all to ashes. Outside, the trio approached, their hearts racing with the anticipation of destruction. They had had their fun, rattling off ideas of their glorious escape, laughing about how easy it would be to disappear into the night, leaving nothing but chaos behind. The leader of the group, a man called Jake, pulled out a lighter with a devilish grin. The flick of the metal flint sounded like a shot in the silence. The flame danced eagerly, but just as he moved to ignite the kerosene-soaked rags they'd brought, a thunderous voice broke through the night. The three men froze, their bravado shattered by that singular command. Jake turned, eyes widening as they locked onto Tom's determined figure. The automatic response of a predator caught in the glow of a flashlight flickered through the air, the bravado draining from their faces like water from a cracked vessel. Tom stepped closer, holding the fire extinguisher like a shield. "You think you can burn my barn?" Each word cut through the night, thick with conviction. The intensity of the moment hung in the air. Jake instinctively stepped back, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is none of your business, old man." Fun. At that moment, Tom's eyes flickered with a fiery resolve. He approached deliberately, the weight of his years etched on his face, solid as the ground beneath him. "Destroying what I've worked for isn't fun, it's cowardly." The absurdity of the situation rippled through the air. These criminals, armed with nothing but a lighter and a misguided sense of power, looked at a man who was their polar opposite. He wielded years of toil and an unyielding spirit. They were drunk on arrogance while he stood grounded, unshaken. In that charged silence, something shifted in the atmosphere. Jake's bravado crumbled. "Let's just go, fellas. This isn't worth it," he said, his voice quavering as uncertainty crept in. What had begun as a thrill-seeking adventure morphed into a standoff at the hands of a man they underestimated. Tom pressed forward, extinguishing any flicker of doubt. "Walk away now and don't ever come back. You'll know respect from fear." His confident tone radiated wisdom, exposing that beneath the rough exterior of a farmer was a heart filled with warmth. The criminals looked at each other, confusion washing over their faces. They exchanged nervous glances as if searching for something, a validation that didn't come. Tom took another step closer, the beam of the flashlight catching the glint of his eyes, sparking an unexpected flicker of admiration. He wasn't about to bow out. He wasn't to be threatened. As moments stretched into what felt like an eternity, Jake and his two companions turned tail, deflated. One by one, they backed away into the shadows, their bravado evaporating into the night air. The sound of their hurried footsteps echoed, and silence settled once more over the barn. In the stillness that followed, Tom released a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. It tasted like victory mixed with disbelief. His heart raced, but beneath the surface lay a profound relief. He had stared into the face of danger and stood his ground, not just for the barn, but for everything that made him who he was. He turned back toward the dim interior, the warm smell of hay and leather clinging to the air. He stepped inside, feeling the comforting weight of the tools around him, each a reassurance that he was not just a farmer. He was a guardian, a protector of roots, family, and heritage, a lineage that refused to be erased by fleeting acts of malice. As he closed the barn door, locking away the night's drama like a precious memory, the stars above continued their watch, oblivious to the chaos below. They twinkled in approval, reminding him that often, the greatest battles are not fought with weapons but with courage, heart, and an unwillingness to let fear dictate fate. Tom smiled softly to himself, reflecting on a truth deeply embedded in his soul. In the silence that followed, he could hear the low hum of the critters outside, the soft rustle of the trees, and in those sounds was a promise, the promise of a new day. No criminal, no flicker of flame could alter the legacy he was crafting with each sunrise. And as the moon dipped below the horizon, darkness faded into dawn, igniting the world with hope and resilience. Tom was ready to face whatever came next, because one thing was certain: those who dare to threaten what is good will always inspire the fiercest of defenses. The moon hung high over the quiet valley, casting a silver sheen across the sprawling farmland, but beneath that calm surface lurked a dark intention. In the shadows, three figures crouched behind the wilting corn, their hearts racing with adrenaline and mischief. They were hooligans, young men filled with bravado and reckless ambition, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Tonight's the night, boys," whispered Jake, the de facto leader, a smirk plastered across his face. The barn in question was more than just wooden beams and straw to Tom Reynolds. It was a symbol of his hard work, late nights, and dreams. It was where he nurtured his animals and kept his equipment. They were unaware of the resolve that resided within that barn, a spirit forged from years of labor and love, and they severely underestimated the man who called it home. Tom was restless in the kitchen, the aroma of his late-night coffee swirling in the air. He glanced out the window, catching the glimmer of the moonlight reflecting off the barn roof. In that moment, a fleeting thought warned him. Perhaps it was just instinct, a feeling like a whisper in the back of his mind, but he shook it off. "Nothing's going to happen tonight," he murmured to himself, trying to calm the growing tension in his chest. He poured another cup of coffee, unaware that shadows were creeping closer, fueled by a cruel sense of mischief. Outside, the trio drew closer to the barn, emboldened by the alcohol coursing through their veins and the thrill of their plot. They bristled with excitement, their fear overshadowed by the camaraderie shared through wild ideas and reckless plans. Each step echoed with a bravado that shrouded their apprehensions. They hadn't come this far to turn back. Behind the old wooden barn doors, the silence felt heavy, almost alive. Unbeknownst to the intruders, Tom had been watching. He had witnessed their approach from the corner of his eye as they slipped through the fields like a snake through grass. His heart had quickened, but his mind was sharp. He slipped out of the kitchen and moved quietly toward the barn, each step deliberate, his resolve hardening. Tom had always been a man of action. The barn had seen many storms and hardships, and each time it had stood firm. Just like him, when the drought took the crops, he toiled harder. When the storms threatened the animals' lives, he made sure to protect them. This time wouldn't be any different. He had prepared himself for the worst, and while the criminals carried lighters and gasoline, Tom possessed something far more powerful: cunning and a plan. He reached the barn and quietly entered through a side door, letting the darkness embrace him. The scent of hay filled the space, a familiar comfort that invigorated him. Immediately, he set to work, quickly gathering tools, remembering what lay around him, surveying the small details of his sanctuary. Every corner held a memory, every beam held a promise. Just then the intruder struck. Jake took a deep breath, holding up a bottle of gasoline as if it were a trophy. His voice cut through the night like a blade. One of his friends hesitated. Jake rolled his eyes, brushing off the fear as if it were a pesky insect. He's probably asleep. Tom heard the exchange, heart pounding in his chest. They were close. He could hear the crackle of the plastic bottle and feel their reckless energy. But he was ready. With quiet determination, he opened the barn door just a crack, just enough to see the chaos unfolding just outside, and more importantly, to be seen. Tom's voice boomed into the night, commanding attention. The criminals froze, stunned and wide-eyed, as if caught in a spotlit performance they never wanted to star in. Jake shouted back, adrenaline amplifying his bravado, but Tom could hear the tremor beneath the bravado. "I'm the man who's about to ruin your fun," Tom replied, stepping fully into the moonlight, the barn's ancient wooden structure framing him like a fortress. His presence seemed to swallow the bravado out in the open night. For a moment, Jake's face faltered. He exchanged glances with his partners, uncertainty creeping into their minds. "We were just," he stammered, the tough guy act faltering. Tom took a step closer. "Messing around? You really think it's funny to burn someone else's home?" Another tense moment stretched between them as Jake weighed his options. He could feel the reality of Tom's words wrapping around him, tightening like a noose. The thrill was evaporating quickly and being replaced by a gnawing fear, a fear that they had gone too far. Jake tried one last time. "We were just joking. Don't be a buzzkill." "There's nothing funny about burning my barn," Tom said, his tone calm yet fiery, holding steady like a ship against a storm. The trio exchanged looks, Jake struggling to maintain his bravado in the face of Tom's unwavering gaze. There was something in the old man's eyes that hinted at depth, a life lived under the open sky, and it stirred something between them. It was a flicker of recognition, perhaps a sliver of respect. I don't want any trouble," Jake finally said, his voice wavering. Tom nodded. "Then walk away." The moment lingered, and as Tom's steady presence confronted the chaos, something shifted. The thrill they initially felt began to fade, replaced by embarrassment and fear. One by one, they turned away. Their courage deflated. They backed away slowly, casting one last glance at the threat they never anticipated. Tom stood firm but didn't relish their retreat. The weight of the night pressed down on him, an intense mix of triumph and disbelief. They were no longer shadows. They were boys who had dared to face a man who wouldn't back down. As they faded into the night, Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. He stepped back inside the barn, heart still racing. He knew he would need to be more vigilant. The fear wouldn't dissolve entirely. These boys hadn't just threatened his barn, they had put into question an entire way of life. But on that night, he held something infinitely stronger than fire: his dignity, his resolve, and the fierce determination to protect what was his. He locked the barn door behind him, secure in the knowledge that he had faced down danger with his head held high. The dawn came soft and subtle. Tom brewed coffee, letting the warmth seep into his bones. As the sun broke through the horizon, lighting up the fields ablaze in golden hues, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This land was his, and he would fight for it every single day. Every sunrise was a reminder of resilience, and every challenge faced was just another chapter in a story that would never be finished. His thoughts drifted back to the trio, those misguided boys chasing thrills without thought. Perhaps if they had learned respect instead of fear, they would have found a better way to find their excitement. But in the quiet expanse of his barn, Tom found peace, prepared to embrace every new day with the same spirit that had guided him for years. And as he stepped out into the daylight, the barn stood behind him, not just a structure made of wood, but a monument of his spirit, a testament to the battles fought silently through the ages. He was the farmer, and he was unbreakable. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the land, when the whisper of a plan rippled through the night air. Dark shapes moved stealthily across the field, 3 figures crouching low as they crept closer to their target, the old barn that stood resolutely on the Reynolds property. To anyone else, it looked like just another structure, weathered by time and storms, but to the criminals, it was the perfect canvas for their reckless desires. "Look at that thing," Jake said, a sneer on his face. The dim light flickered over his companions, Ethan and Mike, who nodded eagerly, fired up by Jake's bravado. They had gathered over beers earlier, chatting about how easy it would be to make their mark on this quiet town, to leave a trail of chaos behind. It seemed like just a wild idea in the bar, but now, here they were, adrenaline pumping as they moved closer to the barn. "Just think of it." Ethan chuckled darkly. They all shared a laugh, fueled by youthful arrogance as they approached the structure that Tom Reynolds called home. Inside that barn, Tom was wide awake, his senses sharper than ever. He had seen the flicker of movement outside, shadows darting between the tall stalks of corn. A little twist of fear curled in his gut, but it was familiar. Farmers know that fear can either paralyze or ignite action. Tonight, he was more than just a farmer. He was a guardian of everything he had built with years of hard work. With careful steps, Tom reached for a flashlight hanging by the door, feeling the reassuring weight of it in his hand. He wasn't going to wait for these 3 to make their move. He had spent countless nights fixing fences, tending to livestock and planting seeds, not just in the ground, but in a legacy. No way was he going to let anyone threaten that. Ears pricked up as he moved closer to the barn door, the soft rustling of the corn mixing with the distant chirping of crickets creating an unsettling symphony. Peering through a crack, he could see their silhouettes against the pale moonlight, huddled together in hushed conspiratorial whispers. Rage flickered inside him, but it wasn't a reckless outrage. It was clarity, a crystallization of purpose. Tom moved silently but with confidence, mentally preparing himself. He quickly grabbed supplies, a couple of old tires and some wood scraps. He planned to use them for something much different than what the trio had in mind. The barn would not succumb to their folly. Not tonight. Outside, Jake had unscrewed a bottle cap, revealing the pungent yellow gasoline inside. "This will do the trick," he said, eyeing the barn, enthusiasm infectious amongst the group. They were ready to act, the thrill of destruction dancing in their eyes. "Let's make this quick," Mike urged, his restless energy bubbling just beneath the surface. He didn't want to get caught, and the reality of their actions was starting to settle in. But Jake's bravado brushed those hesitations aside. He laughed, raising the gasoline bottle in a mock toast. With that, he tipped the bottle, letting the liquid stream toward the barn, soaking into the dry wood and pooling below like venom. Tom saw the peril unfurling before him and took a deep breath, his heart pounding like a hammer. He flicked on the flashlight and burst through the barn door, illuminating the darkness. He shouted, his voice fierce and commanding, cutting through their laughter like a knife. The 3 turned quickly, eyes wide with shock, their bravado evaporating under the weight of his gaze. Jake blurted, bravado faltering as he faced a man with the fire of 1,000 storms. "I'm the man who's about to ruin your night," Tom declared, stepping fully into the light, his presence transformed from a mere farmer to a sentinel guarding his domain. "You think it's a game?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment, deep fear played behind Jake's eyes. This wasn't the confrontation they had prepared for. Tom stood unwavering, a wall of resolve, ready to protect, ready to fight for everything he believed in. "Come on, old man," Jake scoffed, though the conviction was slipping. Tom took a step forward, the light from the flashlight casting shadows that danced around him. "It's not about fear, son, it's about respect." Ethan fidgeted nervously, glancing between Jake and Tom. "Maybe we should just leave," he said, his voice a whisper barely breaking the silence. Jake snapped. But a tremor of uncertainty tinged his voice, and Tom could see the doubt settling in. Tom said, his voice low and steady, filled with a fierce calm. He turned quickly, grabbing the old tires and tossing them out of the barn. Mike asked, confusion and fear mixing together. Tom realized he had a small window to tap into their youthful arrogance. "You want to see some flames? I can give you that." The criminals exchanged apprehensive glances, unsure if this was a trick or genuine bravado. But dimly, they could feel the tide shifting, their earlier amusement fading into a cold knot of fear. Jake said, his confidence finally cracking. Tom took a steady step forward, the flashlight beam illuminating the old barn's wooden walls, which echoed his resolve. "Scaring you isn't my goal," he replied. He tossed the tires onto the ground, positioning them strategically, and glanced back at the trio. "I've spent years building this place. It's not just wood and nails, it's my life." Jake hesitated, trying to regain control of his emotions, but fear danced in his eyes. "I don't want any trouble, old man." "Then walk away," Tom said, voice steady, eyes blazing like a wildfire. Confusion and frustration rippled through the air, the realization dawning that they were facing far more than a simple farmer. With every silent moment stretching longer, the boys felt the weight of their own decision. They were at a crossroads, and for the first time they had to confront the reality of their actions. "The barn isn't just a structure to me," Tom continued, his voice dipping low. "It's the heart of this land, the symbol of generations that came before me. You think I'm just some old man who doesn't understand your world? You are mistaken. I understand strength and I understand courage." Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through, kicking up a cloud of dust, and Tom seized it as a moment of clarity. The glimmers of fear behind the boy's eyes intensified. What if they pushed too far? "Just walk away," he repeated, the strength in his voice echoing across the night. "You're better than this, all of you. There are better ways to have fun than destroying someone else's hard work." For a fleeting moment, Tom saw understanding spark in Jake's eyes, a flicker of something real. But as quickly as it appeared, it was snuffed out by teenage defiance and rebellion. "Forget it," Jake finally spat. Tom took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was to come. With that, he turned and quickly prepared to defend what was his, the flickering light of the flashlight becoming a beacon amidst chaos. The tension hung thick as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and reds. Tom was no longer just a guardian. He had become a warrior defending his home against a storm of foolishness. The boys, seeing his unwavering resolve, faltered. Jake's bravado crumbled further, doubt seeping in like water through cracked earth. "What if we just leave?" he said, panic rippling through him. "Do that," Tom replied, grounding himself further. But guilt and shame were emotions the trio had buried in their reckless quest for chaos, and instead, Jake drew closer, blindly feeding the fire of rebellion. Tom's heart sank. He had done all he could to reason with them, but now he had to rely on another kind of strength. The world they were playing in was foreign to him, yet even amidst the chaos, he found clarity in the face of opposition that empowered him. With his back to the barn, he held his ground. He either had to scare them away or prepare to confront them head-on. "You underestimate the strength of this barn and what it represents. You underestimate me. You think I'm just going to let you take everything I've built." The atmosphere thickened as Jake and his friends continued to hesitate, confused and caught up in the whirlwind of their emotions. The subtle shift in power began to unfold before them. The darkness no longer seemed inviting, but daunting. "Walk away, gentlemen," Tom urged again, his voice now almost pleading. And just like that, a wave of realization crashed over the trio. No amount of bravado would stave off the truth. This man wasn't just defending his barn, he was standing up to them, challenging them to reconsider their path. Their excitement began to dwindle, consumed by the weight of their choices. One by one, they stepped back, Jake's defiance finally cracking under the pressure. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a shadow of shame. "We'll just head out," he mumbled, the fight draining from him. "Good choice," Tom replied, voice steady, feeling the flicker of hope spark within him. As the trio retreated into the shadows, defeated but alive, Tom remained poised, standing guard over his barn, his home, his legacy, breathing in the sharp, cool night air, victorious. In that moment, he understood that sometimes battles are won not by fists or violence, but through the power of belief and the courage to stand firm against chaos. He felt rejuvenated, knowing that no matter what, he would always fight to protect the life he loved. Watching as the dawn broke beyond the horizon, he took a deep breath, the warmth of the sun framing a new day of challenges and opportunities. The barn remained standing, a testament to endurance against the tides of fate. The farmer was one step ahead once again, and he wouldn't let anyone ever take that away from him. The night air was thick with tension, the kind that prickled at the back of your neck, making the quiet seem alive with danger. The old barn stood in the distance, looming like a guardian of dark secrets. Inside, Tom Reynolds sat awake, heart pounding, sensing that something was off. A farmer's intuition is never wrong, and tonight it was screaming at him. Meanwhile, just beyond the cornfield, three silhouettes huddled together, basking in the thrill of their sinister plan. The leader, Jake, grinned as he held up a gasoline bottle like it was some kind of trophy. "It's about time we made our mark on this town," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. Ethan and Mike exchanged glances, excitement and nervousness warring within them. They didn't really think this through. In their youthful recklessness, they were riding high on bravado and cheap beer. Ethan asked, his voice shaky. Jake laughed, brushing off the concern. "Catch us, who's going to care about a couple of kids lighting up a barn?" But deep down, even he felt a flicker of doubt. Still, the prospect of destruction overrode every ounce of caution. Back in the barn, Tom stood slowly, the floorboards creaking under his weight. He knew he had to stay alert. Months of sweat and toil had gone into every plank of that barn. It wasn't just a building. It was a repository of dreams and memories. He had lost too much before, his father's farm to the drought, and many years before that, his own youthful ambition. He couldn't lose this, not now. Outside, the trio approached the barn, hearts pounding, the darkness wrapping around them like a cloak. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the landscape, illuminating the scene just enough for Tom to see the figures lurking beyond the corn. Instinct kicked in. He knew he had to act fast. Tom moved quietly to the barn door, glancing around for something to use. He spotted an old fire extinguisher tucked in the corner. It was rusted and dusty, but it would do. He snatched it up, collecting his thoughts and breathing deeply to steady himself. He had faced the storms of life. Now he would face this storm head-on. As he stepped outside, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel startled the trio. They froze, turning toward the sound, eyes wide with panic. Mike hissed, the bravado fading quickly. "Just act cool," Jake whispered back, though his confidence was fading. "We're just—" Tom stepped into the moonlight, his silhouette growing larger as he approached. "Not so fast, boys," he called out, his voice steady and firm, echoing across the quiet night. The three stumbled over their words, caught unprepared. Jake stammered, scrambling for an excuse. Tom challenged, narrowing his eyes. Jake's bravado flickered out like a candle caught in a draft. "It's just a joke, man," Tom echoed, stepping closer, the fire extinguisher gripped tightly in his hand. Mike started to back away. "We're not going to do anything," he urged, panic rising in his voice, but Jake wasn't ready to admit defeat. "No way, we're not backing down." The defiance in his voice was more of a cry for courage than actual bravado. Tom felt a fire ignite deep within him, a roar of protective instinct for everything he had worked for. He shouted, now a blend of anger and fear, "That barn holds every ounce of my life's work." The three exchanged uncertain glances. Doubt crept into their hearts as their bravado diminished like the twilight fading into night. Seeing the fierce conviction in Tom's eyes, Jake faltered. "It's just a stupid barn," he muttered, but deep down, the truth hit him like a brick wall. Tom took a step closer, his presence looming like the barn's structure itself. A man forged from hardship, determination, and an unbreakable will. "If you want to play with fire, you better know the consequences," he warned, voice low and chilling. Just then, the wind picked up, rustling the nearby cornfields as if nature itself were warning the young men to back down. Mike's fear escalated and he began to edge away, taking in the enormity of Tom's resolve. "Let's just leave, man," Ethan said, finally summoning the courage to speak. But Jake, desperate to hold onto the fragment of power he felt, took a defiant step forward. Tom's patience was wearing thin. "Then let's make this interesting," he said, letting the weight of his words hang in the air like an electric charge. "Think you're tough?" The confidence slipped away from Jake as he faced Tom's unwavering gaze. He asked, voice trembling. With a swift motion, Tom raised the fire extinguisher. "You want to see fire? I'll show you." He glanced back toward the barn, visualizing what was at stake. The trio exchanged bewildered looks. Was this man really going to battle them? Did he really mean it? Doubt clouded Jake's fear as he stood his ground. Tom's heart raced, but he wouldn't back down. "You think I wouldn't?" For the first time, the thrill of their plan began to ebb away, replaced by the cold grip of apprehension. They had come to destroy something, but now they faced an immovable force, a man who had fought for every piece of earth beneath them. "Come on, Jake," Ethan pleaded, voice shaking. But Jake, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and denial, stood firm. "No, we've come this far. I'm not backing down," he blustered. Tom took a step back and raised the fire extinguisher high, a silent warning in his eyes. "You think you can intimidate me with your threat of fire? I've battled storms and droughts long before you were even born." Time seemed to stretch as the weight of Tom's words sank in. They had expected an easy target, a man they could easily overpower. Instead, they found a father, a guardian, standing resolute against their chaos. The balance of power had shifted. As Tom's fierce determination crashed against their uncertainty, Jake felt a knot of dread settle in his stomach. Was this risk really worth it? We didn't mean any harm," he finally muttered, the bravado slipping away. The realization hit him like a freight train. No amount of bravado would help them escape the consequences of their actions. What they initially saw as a form of fun morphed into a moment of reckoning. "Then walk away," Tom urged, his voice softer but no less resolute. The three young men hesitated, glancing at one another, fear swirling in the air like storm clouds. Tom's unwavering presence loomed over them, like the barn itself fortified and impervious to their petty desires and destructive whims. Jake's defiance faltered, and before he knew it, he found himself taking a step back. "Let's just go," he proclaimed, the words heavy with finality. Tom watched as they turned and hurried away, the tension in the air dissipating with their retreat. The adrenaline that had once surged through him began to ebb away, leaving behind a sense of quiet victory. He stood still for a moment longer, fire extinguisher in hand, heart pounding as reality settled in. The barn still stood, a monument to resilience, encapsulating everything he held dear. And for the first time in that dark night, the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in gentle hues of pink and gold. Tom took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. He had stood his ground against chaos and won. Every farmer knows that the land will throw challenges their way, but it's how you respond to those challenges that truly defines who you are. In that quiet moment, he realized he had not just protected his barn, he had defended his spirit. With his heart full and determination renewed, Tom turned back toward the barn. He had a lot of work to do, much to rebuild after the fears that had momentarily clouded his world. The sun broke through, illuminating the barn like a beacon as he stepped inside, ready to embrace whatever came next. The battle was won, but the war for a life well lived would continue, a fight he was more than prepared for. The moon hung ominously high in the sky, shrouded in dark clouds that whispered secrets of chaos. In the quiet of the valley, a barn stood steadfast, its wooden structure bearing the scars of time. But on this fateful night, it was not just a barn. It was a target marked for destruction by three reckless souls hiding in the shadows. Jake, the audacious leader, clutched a gallon of gasoline, his fingers trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "We light this place up and we'll make history," he said, a wild glimmer in his eyes. Beside him, Ethan fidgeted nervously, glancing at the darkened farmhouse not far off. He whispered, the thrill of the plan slowly wearing off. "Caught!" Jake snapped, his confidence barely masking his own unease. "This old farmer is probably asleep." Behind them, Mike couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. A warm summer breeze rustled the cornfield, but it felt far from comforting. He asked quietly, hope lacing his tone. Jake's laugh cut through the air like a knife. Sure, who cares? But unbeknownst to them, the farmer was not just anyone. Tom Reynolds had spent decades pouring his soul into this land. The barn housed not just equipment, but memories, years of hard work, late nights balancing the books, and early mornings tending to animals. It was the heart of his existence, and tonight he could feel an electric tension in the air. As the three boys continued their banter, Tom was wide awake inside the barn, instinctively aware of something darker lurking in the night. Years of experience had sharpened his instincts, and he moved quietly through the dimly lit space, checking on the livestock. His breath caught when he glanced out toward the cornfield, catching a flicker of movement. Shadows danced and coiled like serpents in the moonlight. Quickly, Tom stepped to the barn door, watching as the trio of mischief-makers crept closer. The adrenaline surged through his veins, igniting a fierce protectiveness within him. He readied himself, knowing he had to confront them. There was no room for fear. He had faced storms that could rip the roof off, droughts that threatened his crops, but this was a different kind of threat, one that could strip him of everything. He called out, his voice booming through the still night air. The three boys jumped, their laughter silenced as they turned to face him. Tom stepped out of the shelter of the barn, energy and authority radiating from his stance. Ethan's face went pale and he stepped back instinctively, but Jake's bravado returned in an instant. "We're just hanging out, old man." Tom narrowed his eyes, the adrenaline baking into determination. He motioned to the bottle, catching the glint of fear in their eyes beneath their masks of arrogance. "What's the plan?" Jake gulped, but he wasn't about to back down. He blurted, though the confidence in his voice faltered. Standing firm, Tom took a moment studying them. The bravado of youth mixed with desperation made them look foolish more than threatening. "You think this is a game?" The sound of the wind rustled through the cornfield, a chilling reminder of nature's power, and the fear began to seep in. How far had they really thought this through? The thrill of rebellion was starting to blend with confusion etched across their faces. Inside the barn, Tom had been collecting his thoughts, mapping out strategies in his mind. He had faced loss before, and even now, he wouldn't let anyone destroy what he cherished. With swift precision that came from years of hard work, he reached for an old wooden crate and tipped it over, revealing tools used in his daily labor. "Look, old man," Jake tried to salvage his dwindling courage. "You don't have to get all worked up, just let us go." Tom strode forward, not taking his eyes off Jake. "I have a lifetime of blood, sweat, and tears in that barn." The tension hung palpably in the air, a battle brewing between Tom's resolve and their reckless arrogance. Mike could feel his heart racing, and without thinking, he stepped back toward the safety of the shadows. He murmured, voice barely audible. Jake spat, frustration rising. "What are you scared of?" But Mike's voice trembled as he reminded them, "But he's right." Tom turned slightly, feeling the change in the air. "You really think it's just an old man? Look closer." His words wrapped around the boys, carrying the weight of truth and experience. "Do you think a night of chaos gives you power?" The words hit harder than Tom expected. For a moment, Jake hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, but his bravado clanged back into place. "You think we care?" Tom took a deep breath. "It means everything to me." With a sudden movement, he raised the fire extinguisher high, a burst of confidence fueling him. Jake's bravado faltered further and Mike stepped back completely. Tom challenged, holding the extinguisher like a sword. "You think that's fun?" The boys exchanged uneasy glances, the moment cracked with fear, uncertainty pooling in the corners of their minds. They were on the edge of a cliff, the thrill of rebellion burning low. Tom implored, lowering the extinguisher slightly. "Do you want to run from the law, to live in shame?" Jake's resolve cracked further, but instinct made him push back. "You can't intimidate us." But just as soon as the words left his mouth, he could sense the apprehension within himself. What mark, a scar on another person's life? How had they let it come to this? Tom took another step forward. "You want respect, you earn it." For the first time, Jake felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He was only a kid, trapped in an ideology of rebellion, but this man, the farmer, was standing here, living a truth that he had turned his back on. Mike's voice trembled. The silence weighed heavily, creating a pause where fear met clarity. Tom stood firm, letting them grapple with their choices, his heart racing but steady. He wasn't just defending his barn, he was igniting a catalyst for them to see something different. "I can't believe I ever thought this was a good idea," Ethan said, his voice shaking. Tom nodded slowly, observing the shift in their thoughts. "You still can." Jake's bravado fractured completely, uncertainty flooding his expression. All the fire in his veins was dampened by the simple truth. "Let's go," he mumbled, finally succumbing to the reality that loomed all around him. With reluctant steps, the trio turned away from the barn, from the man they had underestimated, and they began to slip back into the shadows. As they vanished into the night, Tom felt the tension release, though his heart hammered in the aftermath. He stood alone now, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly, the weight of the moment sinking in. Against all odds, he had faced danger, not just for his barn, but for a piece of something greater, the integrity of a man willing to protect what he loved most. With every sunset and dawn, every challenge that rose and fell like the ebb and flow of the tides, the fight was no longer just physical. It was one born from the spirit of resilience, the understanding that sometimes battles are best fought with wisdom rather than violence. The barn stood behind him, a fortress of memories and dreams. As the first light of dawn began to filter down, painting the skies with hues of hope, Tom felt victorious, not just against the threat of the night, but against an ideology that sought to destroy. With those boys retreating into the distance, he walked back toward the barn, filled with a sense of purpose. He had stood his ground, and at that moment he knew. In this life, when threatened by chaos, it's how we respond that truly defines who we are. No matter what came next, he was ready to protect this piece of earth he called home. It was more than just a barn. It was a testament to strength, perseverance, and unyielding love. And as morning broke fully, mists lifted from the earth, revealing the landscape anew. Tom Reynolds stepped forward with renewed vigor, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The night stretched like a dark blanket over the quiet fields, but amid the serenity, the air buzzed with a current of danger. The old barn on the Reynolds farm stood proud, its wooden beams weathered yet strong, like a sentinel guarding the dreams of generations. But a trio of young men, filled with reckless bravado, had other plans for that night. Jake, the ringleader, kicked a pebble, watching it skitter over the ground. "This is it, boys," he said with a manic grin, clutching a bottle of gasoline. Ethan shrugged, his excitement mingled with unease. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Jake scoffed. "It'll be a laugh." The faint light from the moon glinted off the bottle as he held it like a trophy, the smell of fuel mixing with the night air, intoxicating their senses. Mike, standing awkwardly by, shifted his weight. "I don't know, man." Anxiety gripped him like a vice. They were standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. "Stop being a baby, Mike," Jake shot back, but even he felt the distinct tremor in his hands. This wasn't just a prank, it was a crime. Still, the lure of excitement won over caution. Across the field, Tom Reynolds sat in the dim glow of his kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. He felt an unsettling energy in the air, an instinct honed by years of farming. Something didn't feel right. For a man who had weathered many storms, both literal and metaphorical, he had learned to trust his gut. He peered out the window, eyes narrowing as he spotted the flicker of movement beyond the silos. 3 figures. Their silhouettes danced in the darkness, slowly inching toward the barn. A chill ran down his spine. Tom walked over to the door, his boots meeting the cold wooden floor with each deliberate step. The barn was his sanctuary, the heart of his legacy, and he wouldn't let anyone take that away from him. Unbeknownst to the trio, Tom had spent years building not just the barn, but the life that surrounded it, a tapestry woven from hard work, sweat, and passion. It was more than a structure. It represented everything he held dear. With a surge of determination, he grabbed a flashlight and moved silently toward the door. Outside, the boys shared hushed laughter, their laughter ricocheting off the stillness of the night. "Just think about the look on that old man's face," Jake said, excitement flooding his voice. Ethan whispered, glancing nervously toward the farmhouse. Jake retorted, bolstered by the thrill of rebellion. He approached the barn door, heart racing not just with fear but with the intoxicating promise of chaos. Tom slipped out of the house, determined to confront them before they could do any damage. "Hey!" His voice shattered the calm night like glass. The trio froze, caught in the act. Jake swung around, arrogance flaring in his chest, but his bravado quickly faltered when confronted by Tom's intense gaze. He fumbled. Tom said, stepping closer, a steady light illuminating his features. The determination in his eyes burned brightly, his resolve unwavering. Jake's confidence slipped, replaced by a flicker of fear. "We were just looking around," Ethan chimed in, voice wavering. "Looking around." Tom moved in closer, shaking his head. Ethan's panic surged and he looked at Jake pleadingly. Jake clenched his teeth, resisting the urge to retreat. "We're not scared of you," he shot back, voice straining with defiance. But the truth was, uncertainty crackled in the air and Tom sensed it. "I don't want to fight you," Tom said, his voice maintaining a firm but calm tone. "But the moment you decided to come here, you chose to challenge not just me but the values I've spent years building." For a moment, time stood still. Jake's bravado flickered as he searched for the right words. He exclaimed, but even to him it sounded weak. Tom continued, unwavering. "Burning it down won't give you strength, boys." A gust of wind swirled around them, mirroring the conflict brewing in Jake's mind. As Tom stood ground, confronting their reckless intent with unwavering strength, the trio felt the weight of his words. The once thrilling idea of chaos morphed into something darker. Jake shot back, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I mean, you're all too young to throw your lives away for a moment of excitement," Tom said steadily. His words cut through the bravado and uncertainty twisted in Jake's gut. The glimmer of defiance was slowly giving way to doubt. The night air grew thick with contemplation, and the weight of Tom's gaze bore into each of them. "Let's walk away," Ethan urged, trembling, the desire to flee overpowering the thrill that had once consumed him. "Fine," Mike added, backing away. Jake shouted, frustration edging his voice. But deep down, he wrestled with the consequences of their actions. Were they really about to commit this crime? Tom's heart raced, sensing the tide turning. "You're better than this. Each of you is standing at a crossroads. You can walk away now and change your path, or you can continue down a road that leads to regret and shame." For Jake, the world around him was shifting. He could feel the strange mixture of fear and respect settling in as Tom's resolve stood as a testament to what it meant to truly fight for something. It hit him hard. This man wasn't just some farmer. He was a protector of what mattered most. "Just think about it for a moment," Tom urged, calmer now. "A couple of years, you'll look back at this night. Do you want to have memories of destruction?" With each heartfelt word, the warm glow of self-awareness flickered in their minds. Jake resisted the urge to retreat but couldn't shake off the weight of Tom's conviction. It was powerful, undeniable. "Let's just go, Jake," Ethan pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper, fear finally creeping into his tone. Taking a deep breath, Jake finally understood. The fire he sought could be extinguished without any flames. He turned back toward Tom, voice wavering. "Okay, we'll leave." Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him, and with it, a deeper connection. "Thank you. You made the right choice," he replied, his voice softer now. "Remember, we all face challenges." With that, the three boys stepped back, confusion mingling with relief as they slowly retreated into the shadows, leaving behind the what-ifs that had once filled the air with tension. Tom watched them go, heart pounding with the realization of what had just transpired. He had stood firm against those who sought to destroy what he held dear and emerged victorious, not by force, but by the power of words and understanding. As the moonlight spilled over the barn, bathing it in a silver glow, Tom felt an unshakable hope filling him. He had weathered another storm, and the day would break anew. The air began to loosen, and the dawn approached, brushing the horizon with the promise of a new day. Tom stepped back into the warmth of the barn, taking a deep breath and letting go of the worry that had knotted his stomach. The barn would stand strong. It had been built on the foundations of determination and love, and each triumph against the odds only solidified its role as a symbol of resilience. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the landscape, Tom looked out from the barn door, proud and unyielding. The battles he faced wouldn't always be as tangible, but he proved to himself that standing up for what mattered was worth every ounce of effort. And as the sun climbed higher, he embraced the day, ready to face whatever lay ahead, grounded in the understanding that the heart of a farmer beats strongest when defending what he loves most. The darkness of the night felt thick enough to slice through, wrapping around the land like a suffocating blanket. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a ghostly glow over everything, a silent witness to the mischief brewing on the edge of the Reynolds farm. In the shadows of the towering cornfield, three figures moved with nervous excitement, their hearts pounding like drums against their ribcage. "We're gonna do it tonight," Jake whispered, his voice barely breaking the quiet. Clutching a gallon of gasoline in his hands, he looked around at his friends, his wide grin revealing an unsettling eagerness. Ethan replied, glancing back toward the dim farmhouse. The flicker of a light in the window caught his attention, and unease churned in his stomach. "Let him," Jake scoffed, waving off the concern. "We're just having fun." His bravado hung in the air, tinged with insecurities that he tried desperately to suppress. "Yeah, but it's not just a barn," Mike interjected quietly. He felt a ripple of guilt under his skin, the weight of what they planned pressing down hard. "Stop being a wuss," Jake shot back, his laughter echoing darkly across the fields. "It'll be easy." Outside the barn, the old wooden structure loomed like a fortress, a witness to countless storms and years of hard work. Tom Reynolds, the farmer, had poured everything into that barn, his hopes, dreams, and the remnants of generations who had come before him. As he polished his tools on this seemingly ordinary night, a thread of unease pulled at him. Something wasn't right. His instincts were sharp. After years of dealing with livestock and crops, he could sense when danger lurked just beyond the shadows. Peering out the window, Tom squinted through the dusky twilight and caught a glimpse of movement near the edge of the cornfield. There they were. He saw the trio of young men, their silhouettes dancing against the pale moonlight. They huddled together, the gasoline sparkled ominously in Jake's hand. Tom's heart raced, not out of fear but with the adrenaline of anger and protectiveness. "Not tonight," he muttered to himself, determination surging through him like a flood. He laid down the tools meticulously, moving with a sense of urgency. With every step, he reached for the old fire extinguisher that he kept near the barn entrance, a relic of precaution and vigilance from years past. The boys were still laughing, but Tom felt a different tension in the air. Gathering his courage, he stepped outside, his boots crunching against the gravel, each sound vibrant in the detached silence enveloping them. He called out, his voice strong and commanding, echoing through the night like thunder. The laughter died instantly. The three boys turned, eyes wide, caught in the act. Tom asked, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Jake quickly filled the silence. He stepped forward, trying to retain some semblance of daring. Tom stepped closer, eyes narrowing on the gasoline in Jake's hand. "You're about to ruin your lives for a moment of fun." Jake's bravado faltered, but he couldn't show weakness. "It's just a barn." Tom drew a breath, his voice steady, but the fierceness behind it echoed through the cool night air. "That barn is more than a structure. It's the heart of this farm, the embodiment of my life's work. You think you can just walk in here and destroy it?" As if in response to his words, the wind began to pick up, rustling the cornfield in warning. The reality washed over Jake and his friends as they faced the farmer, a man who had fought storms and droughts, a man who wouldn't back down easily. "Listen," Tom said, aiming to reach them. "You're young and reckless, but you don't have to live your life chasing foolish thrills." Inside Jake's mind, chaos collided with uncertainty. This was not how he imagined the night would turn out. As they stood there, caught in a taut moment of decision, Mike began to step backward. "Let's just leave. We didn't mean anything by it," he stammered, words spilling out in a rush. Ethan added, his eyes darting around nervously. Jake shouted, anger flaring within him as he fought the urge to capitulate. Tom regarded them, the flicker of desperation visible in their eyes. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension climb as he prepared to take a stand. "You can have fun, but you don't need destruction to create excitement." The air hung thick with apprehension, and for a moment the boys exchanged uncomfortable glances. Tom sensed the shift in their energy. Jake's bravado felt chipped, the weight of the night beginning to close in, and with each thudding heartbeat, the guilt clawed at him. "Just think about this," Tom pressed on, his voice unwavering. A flicker of something fear perhaps sparked in Jake's chest, momentarily snuffing out his reckless ambitions. Tom could see it. The moment stretched between them, and the echoes of their choices rang in the air. "Let's just go," Mike repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Panic danced on his face now, the thrill of adventure dwindling as quickly as it had risen. "Yeah," Ethan added, stepping back. Jake hesitated, the facade of confidence crumbling under the weight of their collective doubt. "But we wanted to do something big," he muttered, looking at his friends for support. "You'll make a mark all right," Tom replied, his voice steady and firm. "But it won't be the kind you want." The wind howled through the field, seemingly responding to Tom's words, carrying with it an energy that seemed to shift the atmosphere. Jake stood frozen, caught between the thrill of rebellion and the weight of responsibility. Slowly, the anger drained from him like a leaky bucket, replaced by a dawning realization. Finally, Jake turned to his friends, a mix of confusion and fading courage painted across his face. "Maybe he's right," he said, almost too quietly. Ethan nodded quickly, relief washing over him. "Let's just go." "I can't believe I almost did this," Mike added, embarrassment flooding his features. Seeing the flicker of understanding pass through them, Tom took a step back, sensing a victory not just for himself but for them too. "You've made the right choice." Reluctantly, the boys turned to leave, the tension that had electrified the night gradually dissipating. As they walked away, Tom felt the weight of worry lift from his shoulders, and the dawn began to peek over the horizon, casting a gentle light that broke the darkness. But just as he began to relax, a chilling realization gripped him. He shouted, eyes narrowing as he gestured toward the shadows of the cornfield. In their rush to escape, one of the boys had dropped the bottle, the contents spilling across the ground, soaking the earth near the door of the barn. Ethan shouted, panic etched in his voice. Realization hit like a bolt of lightning. The wind shifted, and the gasoline, now ignited by the stray embers from the antics of the boys, began to flicker ominously under the moonlight. Tom's heart sank as the flames began to lick at the edges of the barn. He yelled, racing toward the barn, adrenaline surging through his veins as he prepared to confront the fire. The flickering light cast long shadows, reflecting both chaos and bravery. The boys turned back, fear brewing in their expressions as they saw the blossoming flames. Tom shouted, fear mixing with determination as he dashed toward the barn, instincts kicking in. He grabbed the fire extinguisher and positioned himself between the flames and the barn, the contents a measure of hope against despair. He roared, his voice straining against the crackle of fire as it began to crawl higher, reaching hungrily for the old wooden beams. The boys watched, rooted in place as Tom fought against the blaze, every ounce of his being pushing back against the fire that threatened to consume everything he held dear. Just when it seemed the fire would overwhelm him, the boys finally sprang into action, racing back toward him, their earlier bravado washed away by the stark reality of the situation. Ethan yelled, panic bubbling in his voice. They rallied together, joining hands to grab whatever they could find, a bucket, a shovel, anything to combat the growing inferno. But even as they fought, the flames grew stronger, and Tom's heart raced as he poured the last of the extinguisher onto the flames, desperately trying to quell the chaos. He shouted, eyes raging against the flames, but the fire crackled back defiantly, fueled by the gasoline that stained the ground. As the boys joined forces to help, their fear morphed into a collective sense of urgency. They struggled against the fire, but the futility loomed heavy. The barn stood at a crossroads, their actions now defining the moment, yet the flames continued to lick hungrily at the wooden walls. Watching helplessly as his sanctuary fought against the blaze, Tom felt a spark of desperation igniting within him. Suddenly, with a loud crack, a beam splintered, sending sparks flying into the night, and a piece of the roof sagged, threatening collapse. Tom rose, determination coursing through him like wildfire. He yelled, voice booming. But just as the tension reached its peak, something shifted in the window, sudden gusts sending the flames spiraling faster than anyone could anticipate. Tom's heart sank as he realized he might lose everything he fought to protect. What happened next would change their lives forever, a moment suspended in time where choices would collide with consequences, and the fate of the barn hung in the balance. The past rushed before him in vivid clarity, the years, the memories, the labor lived and breathed within those walls. It wasn't just a structure. It was where he had cradled his children, where he had consoled them during storms, where dreams had taken root and flourished. Suddenly, the flames erupted higher, and Tom lunged forward, the extinguisher screaming in protest as it met the roaring blaze. The boys stared, wide-eyed, caught between fear and the desperate urge to help. Tom shouted, his voice a rallying cry that reached deep into their hearts, and as the chaos swirled around them, a whisper of courage ignited within the young men. They rushed to help, fueled by the flickering threat that resonated with the urgency of their choice. They had come seeking chaos. Now they found themselves in a fight for redemption. Jake yelled, finally shedding the weight of arrogance that had led them here. And together, they stood against the fire, fighting to protect the barn, the heart and soul that tied them all together in that moment, as the embers scattered like stars falling from the sky. But as they battled against the flames, a deafening crack echoed through the night, and a piece of the barn's roof began to fall, catching each of them in a critical moment, suspended on the edge of both destruction and salvation. And in that moment, the future hung by a thread, destined to unfold in a way none of them could ever have imagined.